Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the patrons who help make this possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So here's the thing. It looks like Lucasfilm is ramping up their promotion of the Acolyte in terms of the TV spots and commercials and YouTube videos that they've been sharing. Like the volume of them leading into the release of the first two episodes of the series is much greater than what we've seen in previous series releases. And I think the reason for that has to do with the fact that this may be the first series where we don't have anything to anchor ourselves to per se, right? Or maybe I should say the general audience does. So with The Mandalorian, general audiences know what a Mandalorian is, and then of course pulling out Baby Yoda at the end of the first episode made everybody freak out, and so yeah, you kind of took care of your audience situation there. Then you have the Book of Boba Fett. Everybody knows Boba Fett, right? Even the casual audience. Then with Andor, of course, Cassian Andor had been in Rogue One. Mon Mothma has appeared in multiple movies. Saw Gerrera was in Rogue One. So yes, casual audience access. Then with Ahsoka, you know, yes, of course, people who were into the Clone Wars were very familiar with her. People who watched Rebels were familiar with her. But, you know, animation doesn't get to as many people. She was brought into The Mandalorian for that guest starring appearance in season 2 and then given her own series in. Yeah, there's definitely more investments in these characters. Whereas with the High Republic, it is only people who are reading the books and the comics, the short stories in Star Wars Insider, the audio dramas, right? It is a comparatively limited subset of Star Wars fans that have been consuming High Republic storytelling. However, it is a very passionate subset of the fan base. And clearly it is successful for Lucasfilm because of the fact that they said, well, yeah, let's try a live action show that's set in the High Republic, right? And so that we have the Acolyte for. And when I say we don't have anything to, you know, hang it on for a general audience, it's just the fact that they're a Jedi and that there's somebody waving a red blade around, which is definitely a bad guy as far as the general audience knows. Like, that's all that they have to go on. And it feels like Lucasfilm is aware of and trying to address that fact, considering that over the last week we've had multiple videos show up on their YouTube channel and be released in other social media platforms, including, by the way, an absolutely delightful video about Amanda Stenberg and her violin, the fact that she is an accomplished violinist, and the folks at Lucasfilm asked John Williams if she could play some of his music, and so John Williams wrote some solo orchestrations for her to play on violin, and it's such a touching video. Like, the only thing that's wrong with it is that they don't have John Williams and Amanda Stenberg meeting, right? Like, that would be the ultimate for John Williams to show up while she's playing and say, you know, hey, you know, you sound awesome, congratulations, all that fun stuff. Like, really, just that would have been the absolute best. But as far as the Acolyte itself, so there's a new spot on Star Wars' YouTube channel called Evolve, and it does raise a question that I hadn't necessarily considered. I mean, we've sort of bitten around the edges of it in terms of what's going on with May and the possible duality of May in some fashion. And it has to do with a scene that we see in one of the other earlier teasers situations where in an encounter with the Force, which is led by Mother Anastasia, one of the Jedi, and this looks to be in a flashback situation, falls to his knees and his eyes turn black and he spreads his arms out in supplication, right? It's as if he is being possessed or taken control of, and that's not something that we've talked about here on the show as a possibility for the explanation for a good May, bad May, if you will. And this new Evolve spot has this same situation of Amanda Stenberg's character saying, I didn't do it, And this time she says, "Please believe me." I think the please was not in previous versions. But it also shows her in an icy cave seeming to wake up in a very startled fashion. And that made me wonder if it was possibly a situation where she had been under someone's possession or control or something to that effect and wound up in that cave, passed out, and then woke up back in her own right mind, as it were. And I got to thinking about this also because of another YouTube video that was released yesterday, May 22nd, on their channel, and that is one about May and Soul fighting. So it's an extended sequence where we've seen a little bit of May and flying kicks and that sort of thing. Well, this is a longer sequence from that fight, and there are a couple of very cool moments where Lee Jung-jae is twisting May around and just kind of ducking around, and there's a moment where he appears to have twisted her in one direction, and then the camera pans and suddenly he's behind her, and you're like, okay, that is some Jedi martial arts business right there. And at one point in the fight, May swipes to try to grab Soul's lightsaber and misses, but then, in all the twisting and spinning around, and he then kind of tosses her aside and trips her, and she goes looking for her knives, but somehow in the midst of the fight, Soul has collected every single one of her knives and just kind of waves them and then drops them on the ground dismissively. Honest to goodness, this is the kind of Jedi / Force user fighting that I don't think I realized I would want to see, but it is absolutely something that we could have seen at any point in Star Wars history, because it makes logical sense that, as long as a Jedi is trained in hand-to-hand combat, that they would be pretty darn good at it and be able to use the Force to anticipate what their opponents were going to be doing. And one other thing I wanted to cover while we're here together today is regarding that Evolve trailer. So the text of it, and then the text both in the video itself and then also in the YouTube description, it says, "Before the Empire, before the Menace, there was," and this is where it differs actually. For some reason the video says there was an Acolyte, and the YouTube description says there was the Acolyte. And it's stuff like that that drives me up a wall. What is the correct one? Which one did they really mean? Because they do have two different meanings for us, basically. But those statements about before the Empire and before the Menace, it's great for us Star Wars fans, but that is also meant to frame things for a general audience as well. So basically, we're getting the prequel to the prequel in this series, which, yeah, it's gonna be a wild ride, it seems. So that's what I've got for you today, talking about two new videos that were dropped on the Star Wars YouTube channel yesterday, and this full court press that they seem to be starting up in advance of the series, debuting on Tuesday. It's on a Tuesday this time, Tuesday, June 4th, and we don't yet have details about when the rest of the episodes are going to be released, so I don't know if it's going to switch to Wednesdays for the rest of the series or if it's going to stay on Tuesdays. We're still waiting to hear. But that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help more people find this daily dose of Star Wars joy for themselves. You can do that by telling people in real life and online. You can do that by telling algorithms with ratings and reviews and likes and subscribes and follows and joins. And you can also help me in producing this daily dose of Star Wars joy to share with the world. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.